Today we're talking about one of the things that probably brought you here to the socialautie channel and to the Socially Intelligent Autistic private Facebook group for the 12-week challenge. We're in week 5. And this week we're talking about why, when we set goals, when we have expectations for ourselves, why is it that we're not where we thought we were going to be in life? As a late identified adult autistic, that's kind of where we usually start, late in our 30s, sometimes in our early 40s, and sometimes it's in our 50s. All of a sudden, we're looking at our life, and we may have had our autism awareness for a year or two, we're kind of sitting in the back burner percolating. And all of a sudden, we really start thinking about and seeing our life and wondering, why have I been married or in and out of several relationships more than once? Why have I had so many different jobs and careers? Why doesn't anything seem to work out? And we think it's because, we're autistic and we have social challenges. But there's some really surprising things that science has taught us. And yes, we are wired differently. We are neurodiverse. But there's also some things that are consistent about our molecular architecture of our brain and how our brain strives for homeostatic balance. So today we're going to be talking about the 2 different kinds of functions, the 2 different types of brains that we have in our one skull, or one brain, yes, but literally there's one. But there's 2 areas that function. And we're going to be talking about how that plays a huge part in our life and our outcomes and why things have not worked out the way we thought they would. It's pretty interesting science, and I think you're going to be really excited and surprised to hear the information I'm going to share with you today. So let's get started. In order to get a better understanding of how these 2 brains operate within our actual architecture of our brain, let's first start with a little history on the brain itself. Imagine that this handful of sand, picture one of those grains of sand. One of those grains of sand represents the gray matter. It represents 100,000 neurons. Those are the little parts of your brain that connect and create neural networks. These neurons talk to each other. They send signals across connections called synapses. There can be up to 1 billion connections in that gray matter, the size of a grain of sand. If you zoom out and see the thousands and thousands of these sand grains together, you are now looking at billions and trillions of connections. You are looking at the brain itself. On average, the human brain weighs around 3 pounds. Many may not consider this to be that big of a deal, right? But it is. It runs all of your organs. It regulates your temperature. It operates your immune system. It repairs the continual damage to your body. It controls your muscles, your digestion, your heartbeat, your eye movements. It signals you of danger. It opens you to love and pleasure. This list just scratches the surface. There's also faith, consciousness, instinct, and our brain does all of this while we are doing routine tasks like washing the dishes. Our brain does everything from the most simple to the complex, and yet we have barely begun to fully understand our brains. So the big question of the day is, why is it so hard to accomplish what we set out to do? Our human brain is naturally wired for searching for novelty. Research in science has shown that our brain seeks novelty. It seeks to be stimulated. It seeks those interesting things. So why is it that goal setting is pretty easy. We get excited about it. We set goals. We've got these New Year's resolutions where we're going to lose weight. Yet we always seem to fall short. It's the achieving those goals where we really struggle. And why is that? The answer to why is that, there's two parts to this answer. The first is our brain seeks safety. And we've talked about this in some previous videos, that our brain is always looking to protect us. It defaults, number one, biggest priority of our brain is safety. Well, why is safety such a big part? Because if you're not safe, if you do not exist, if you are not living and breathing, you cannot procreate. And the human brain is wired for protection, to protect the brain. The brain is always going to do, first and foremost, what it has to do to protect you and keep you safe. Our default is to think, well, if our brain is trying to keep us safe, it's a physical safety, right? No, our brain also strives to keep us safe emotionally, and it also strives to keep us safe mentally. The second reason is efficiency. Our brains have developed automatic operations that conserve energy. We talked about our energy week before last and why energy is so crucial, more crucial than any other aspect of the journey of change, because it requires so much energy. Energy is a finite resource, and our brain is a pro at saving it. The brain's efficiency allows us to perform tasks without learning from scratch each time. Rather, the brain develops an automatic response to familiar behaviors. Safety and efficiency help you survive, but they don't ensure you will thrive. So if our brain is first striving for safety and secondly striving for efficiency, it's creating networks of automaticity. And we've talked about automaticity and how we can create new patterns through neuroplasticity. But right now we're focusing on how the automaticity of what we already have in our life is affecting our outcomes and is affecting why things aren't working. And you're going to be really surprised. Your subconscious brain is working against your conscious brain, always. The instincts and the automatic responses that your brain has developed to conserve energy and to keep you alive, those come at a really high cost. They run your life, and because they are part of your limbic brain's high-speed system, which is responsible for 95 to 97% of your habitual function, these collections of subconscious habits become your life. Your life is essentially on autopilot. The decades that have built up to creating these automatic networks in your brain are exactly why you're not getting the results and the outcomes in your life that you want. As late identified autistics, our life up until we become autistically aware, autism aware, have been a compilation of us striving for decades to try and figure the world out. So all of our automated responses and our automated behaviors are based on what we think the world expects of us, what we perceive to be expectations. And we've created these neural networks and these automated responses without knowing it and without consciously making these decisions from an awareness standpoint of who we really are and how we're wired and how our brain works and functions differently from the rest of the world. And so we have all of these years and years of automated responses that we thought were geared towards getting us the results we wanted, but in reality, they were flawed because our interpretation of the world around us was flawed because we did not know that we were wired differently. So as a late identified adult autistic, we are now having to ask ourselves, why is my life the way it is? Why is the big question. We start to search for things. We know that we aren't living our true authentic life. We think we know why, but we're not really sure. But when we dive into how our brain's molecular architecture works and understand better from that standpoint, and then taking this new knowledge and this new awareness that we have of how our brains work and how the world operates and functions, then we can shift and we can start to make these conscious choices. But first, we have to understand how these automated behaviors that we have established in so many different areas of our life are impacting us so that we can begin the phase of destruction, to break those down and to put in those new awarenesses and that new information so that we start to build new automatic responses. So you may be asking, why does my brain even come up with these automated patterns of response? Because your brain is seeking safety. We've established that's the number one goal of your brain. And it's striving for efficiency, to conserve your finite resources of energy. And so it creates these automated responses that are subconscious. So that when your brain, which is always seeking pattern and it's always doing it subconsciously to look for those threats, the subconscious brain is part of your limbic brain, and it is high speed. It works within lightning, split seconds. But your neocortex, your higher thinking, conscious, critical brain, it's pretty slow. It's really sluggish compared to your limbic brain's function. So as your brain is driving everything from this automated subconscious place of habitual response, your brain thinks that it's safe. And it keeps repeating what it knows because that's what your brain has determined is a safe behavior. It's a safe, comfortable zone of operation. It's become automated and therefore safe. But what happens when those automated responses that your brain defaults to because it thinks that it's safe and it thinks that what you're doing is efficient, then you're going to end up with your life and your goals and your outcomes more or less the same from year to year. So ultimately, our brains that are highly adaptable, we know this. We have learned so much in the last 10 years in neuroscience research about neuroplasticity. And that's how we can change and rewire our brains, open new neural pathways and new networks. But although our brains are highly adaptable, they're also dominated by the need to survive and to be efficient. So that leads to our ancient hunter brain, which is very high speed and runs at optimum speed and constantly searching and seeking out safety and efficiency first. And it dominates all things. Our slower farmer and tech society brain, which is our higher critical thinking brain, which would help us implement those goals and those new outcomes and those challenges that we face as we begin to break them down and we can see what we want that change to be. But when we come to internalizing that and acting on it, our subconscious brain throws on the brakes and says, whoa, hold on. That's a threat. That's a threat to my survival. That's a threat to my efficiency because I don't have the neural pathways set up for the automaticity for this yet. So your brain sees that it has to expend all this energy to create new neural pathways. And your brain's going to go for efficiency. It's going to default to those pathways and those neural pathway connections that you've already established that are automatic. Your brain is going to hijack your goals. So to your brain, almost any change that you want to make, Your brain interprets that as a potential risk. This risk applies to not just your physical, but to your emotional, your financial, your mental, and yes, even your social. As far as your brain is concerned, any change is a potential threat. When you see a snake, you don't just see a snake. You see a dangerous snake, right? You don't just see a snake. You see a dangerous snake. That is a perfect example of how your brain will automatically default to safety mode, efficiency. It trains you to go, oh, poisonous snake, dangerous snake. So today we've identified that, not literally, but your figurative brain, you have two of them. You have your conscious brain, which is your slower brain. And it's only responsible, and neuroscience has shown this, that it's only responsible for 3 to 5% of your conscious level of thought. That's all it's responsible for. 3 to 5%. That's it. So your conceptual thoughts and feelings, your deliberate, your explicit, all of these higher thinking functions of your conscious brain only account for 3 to 5% of the action, of the processing. So that means that other 95 to 97% happens on a subconscious level, and it happens lightning fast. It's the perceptual, it's the instincts and emotions, it's those habits, it's those implicit actions. It has the speed advantage over your conscious brain. This is a lot to think about. So this weekend, in your journal questions, I'd like you to reflect on 3 points. Well, 2 points, and then we'll get into the third one on Monday. But 2 points that I want you to reflect on in your journal this weekend. What is the big idea from today's video about your brain and change, and what did you learn? What was something that was the biggest idea that you learned about your brain today? The next step, the next question I want you to reflect on is this. Reflect on the notes that you've taken previously about your day from start to finish. Back in week 1, I asked you to journal what your day looked like from start to finish. Everything that you did from the time you got up till the time you went to bed. We reflected on our eating habits and started food journaling and started a food diary and exercising and talked about all of that in our week 2 or 3 of, week 3 was our energy discussion. So as we move into this next layer, last week we talked about those subtle fears. And those subtle fears are subconscious. So we're taking it a little bit further, and I'd like you to note in this second step, note what you do that is subconscious and automated versus conscious and intentional in your day, in your daily life. Start to become aware of. Go look back at those notes that you took on what your day looked like from the time you get up to the time you go to bed. Really look at those and say, what is it that I do that's just automatic, habitual? What is part of my conscious thought of intentional? And what are my automated, unconscious brain responses? On Monday, which is MoveMonday in our Socially Intelligent Autistic private Facebook group, we're going to go a bit deeper into our awareness of our current automated beliefs and emotions, and the next step in uncovering the layers of the habitual actions that we take and have formed over our lives up until the point that we've become autistic conscious. There's so many things that to this point have led you to where you are. But the perspective on that, the lenses on that have changed. As a late identified autistic, the way you see your life today isn't the way you saw your life 10 years ago. Because now you know. Now you know. So let's start by identifying where those subconscious automated things are occurring so that we can take conscious action to create the life and the outcomes that we seek. See you on Monday.